Hi, Baddies. Welcome back to another episode of Tara's Baddies Club. I'm really excited because today or yesterday, October 1st, is the first day of the 8-week podcasting course. We did it one time before, but now I'm doing it solo as a host and also bringing on all my favorite friends and podcasters. So I hope you join us. You could still sign up. You can even watch the video that you missed on October 1st because it will be recorded as well for anyone that misses it. So I hope you join me in my podcasting course for ethical creation. It is going to be 8 weeks long. And then now I'm really excited because I'm going to be talking with Shaun. She was in the podcasting course. She created Sins and Survivors with her husband, John. And today we're going to be talking about that and also about what she does. So let's get into this episode. Hey, Shaun, thank you so much for
Hi.
joining me today. Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on Baddies Club. I'm so excited because you have a podcast, Sins and Survivors.
I do. After getting to meet some people in the true crime podcasting community, my husband and I started a podcast that is focused on domestic violence, but also on the city where we live, which is Las Vegas. So yeah, it's called Sins and Survivors.
I love that so much. Now, we met at True Crime and Paranormal Festival in Austin, Texas.
Yes. So which was, I can't believe it was almost 2 years ago now. It feels like it was just yesterday sometimes. But yeah, I actually knew you from your TikTok because those first TikToks that you did that I got to see, I was like, who is this woman? I have to find out more about her. She just seems like such an interesting person. And it was so cool to be at the festival and actually get to see you and see you in a different light, I guess, and get to know you better.
Thanks. Yeah, no, those TikToks were interesting.
They were, but I know they got a lot of attention. It was really smart. You were really good at using social media to spread the word about ethics and true crime, and I think that's awesome and admirable.
Thank you. Thank you. I really love a lot of the other players, podcasters there.
Right.
Because they are really focusing on ethics, and that's really what that festival is about. How have you learned about ethics through that festival? And then you even did a panel this year as well.
I did. Well, first of all, one of the first things I did was take the true crime podcasting course that Haley Gray has and Andrea have, and I found that to be just an excellent foundation for research and understanding why it's important to look at different sources and keep track of all your information and to be truthful with the facts you put out there. And then I also was able to do your podcasting course, which helped a lot to connect us with other people in the podcasting world who have been through it all, seen it all, and have a really strong understanding of the importance of respecting victims, letting them tell their own story. And just being a part of that class, one of the topics that came up was using respectful language when you talk about people. And that is something I'm interested in. I always want to be growing in that area and being respectful to people when you talk about them. And I was inspired by that to approach a couple other podcasters and Haley to put together a panel at the festival this past what was it, August? Yeah. July. Actually, it was July. Oh my gosh, yeah. It was like 2 months ago now. And that was on using ethical language. And due to the great connections that everyone has, Ellen and Joey of I Think Not were also a part of that panel. So it was really just a great experience overall.
I love that. Yeah. No, I told Ellen about the festival. We talked about it in our episode together. And then there really was, there's other festivals out there, but I really like the focus of this one. And so I love that you guys did the panel, talked about the language because the language is so important. And then, like, for example, I was on a podcast, Annie Elise's, and I changed my word because I said homeless and then I changed it and corrected myself to unhoused. And that could be affecting someone that maybe has like a sibling that is unhoused and in that environment and in that situation. And so that could affect them, just the language hearing, coming out of someone's mouth.
Yeah. And when you have a platform, I think it's hard to know how many people you're reaching and on what level you're reaching them sometimes. And I think that by setting a good example for your listeners too, it just kind of puts those words in everybody's language, and slowly over time we see them change, because we do have a lot of phrases that we use that can be really stigmatizing or bring up very negative images, and we don't necessarily even mean them to. But one of the examples we use sometimes is, I think we use this one in the panel, is that sometimes if you describe somebody as living in like a trailer park, that gives you a kind of image in your mind as to what that kind of person is. But there's really maybe no need to describe their home in that way, and just say they lived in a small home or they lived in a mobile home community or something like that. But it's just kind of like we have these phrases that we just use every day, all the time, that without even thinking about them, they kind of put pictures in people's minds, and they make assumptions, and sometimes unfair assumptions about the people. So it's just something that like we're always trying to work on.
Yeah, and I like the fact that Haley Gray even talks about how there's certain, and you talk about this as well, how there's certain facts that you could just leave out too.
Yeah. Yeah. What does it add to the person's story? Maybe somebody shoplifted one time, but it has nothing to do with the fact that they were, maybe a victim of some other larger crime. They were murdered or something like that. Then it's kind of like you kind of make them seem like they're a bad person, and maybe that's not really fair. Especially because I think a lot of us, especially when we were younger, we make mistakes. We make small and simple mistakes like that. Um, I know people who got caught shoplifting. That doesn't make them a bad person, but sometimes when someone's listening and they're consuming this content, it might put a bad idea in their mind. And if it's not really relevant to the story, yeah, like Haley always says, you don't have to share it. You can just leave that part out.
Yeah, no, especially if you're a teenager, your amygdala is not fully developed. And so, you're making irrational decisions. And then there's certain parts of your brain that are like more heightened during that time, where you're like more irrational, you're more inclined to make mistakes because your brain is actually telling you to make mistakes. This
Yeah.
is the time to learn.
Right, right. So we just wouldn't want anyone, I know you and I and a lot of people listening, we would never want someone to be judged based on a mistake they made when they were younger. Or I think sometimes you see it with drugs, or sometimes with alcohol too. Oh, when she was found, she had marijuana on her or something like that. And then it gives this person like this stigma. And I don't think that's necessarily fair or relevant a lot of the time.
Yeah, and weed
Maybe
is
not marijuana
legalized.
as yeah, maybe not as much now, not as much now that it's legalized, but there's definitely going to be people that that will take that as being like a negative thing about a person,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
and
so true.
yeah, and judge them. So yeah, it's just, I think if we want to be in the true crime, if we want to be an ethical true crime, then we're always kind of asking each other these questions and kind of looking to each other for advice and just growing. And I think we have a great opportunity to just make true crime better, make each other better podcasters, make the whole genre better. So yeah.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you talk about people's stories in your podcast. And then what are some things that you really got from the podcasting course other than meeting so many great creators?
Yeah. I think understanding how the whole process works, learning about the right software to use, the right ways to make your podcast sound great, like from equipment and then editing, how to manage your time, I think was a lot of it. I think I probably asked a lot of questions about how do you do it all? How do you get it all done? Yes, we connected with great people who are podcasters, but also great up and coming podcasters. And it's always great to network and learn from each other. And I think that's really invaluable. What else? Gosh, I'm trying to think what else I really loved about the course. I think I just loved, I mean, I'm so I just love hanging out with people sometimes, and I'm such a curious person, like a scholar, just like always want to be in school. So I'm like, tell me about your experience. Like, yeah, being curious about what everyone has going on, I think. And then understanding just how the whole world works, what it means to be on a network, or how you can maybe monetize your podcast, which is helpful because it's not a free hobby. I guess you could do it for free, but it takes a lot of time, and there are subscription services that you sometimes need to get your podcast out there. So it's helpful to have a little bit of income coming in, how to market your podcast. Yeah, it was everything. It really was really comprehensive, Tara, everything you put together. So
Thank you. Not to put you on the spot.
I know. I was like, oh, it's final exam time.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Oh my gosh. And then I love your podcast, the
Oh, thank you.
storytelling. I think it's so important that I love that you tapped into a certain niche, and that's part of the podcasting course, is like finding your niche too, like really defining it. And your niche is so certain. I've never heard of that, like survivors and victims, in Vegas and Nevada and stuff. And I love that you put those stories out there. How do you deal with telling these stories, especially ones that because I lived in Vegas.
Right.
And there's a lot of interesting things that go on there. And there's a lot of people that don't necessarily live in this societal norm.
Yeah. What sometimes the way I describe Vegas is we definitely exist for the benefit of people to come here and have a good time. And a lot of what people experience is like the show. This is the show. We've all worked together to put on for you, to entertain you, we are giving you delicious food, like outrageous entertainment. Like we're putting on this whole show for you. And then there's people who live here, people who live and work here. They're like the behind the scenes crew, the actors, all of it that make that whole show possible. And if you're here and you are at a club and you are at a club till 3 a.m., then you know that there are bartenders, there are servers, there are bottle girls, security, like people working 24 hours a day, every day to make this happen. And it does take its toll on the people who live here because it's hard. It's hard to build strong friendships when you work overnights but your friend works a regular 9 to 5, or to find time with your family and deal with kids. Like, so yeah, you're right, it is kind of this like outrageous, outside of the norm, 24-hour nonstop open container, everything's legal all the time. Like, it is kind of outrageous. It puts a lot of strain on the community. That is true. And then also like security, police, emergency services, because it's nonstop. And then when 300,000 people come to your city for the Super Bowl or the F1 racing, big events like that just put a strain on all the resources. Everyone's doing double shifts, or the roads are congested, more accidents, more police being aware of like DUIs, and just everything just gets turned up. And I think when you visit, you only see the show. You see the show, but you don't really get that behind the scenes all the time. Yeah, all the dancers, all the circus performers, all the bartenders, they all have lives and stories. And that's why we wanted to do the show, because I think people don't always get to see all that goes into Vegas, the real community, the people who are here and make it possible.
Yeah, no, it's so crazy. Like, I worked in the entertainment industry in there, and I also worked as a dog groomer. So I got to see different sides of it. And then I lived in like off of Spring Valley, but like borderline Summerlin.
Okay.
And then my mom lived in Henderson. She lived off like kind of on the way to Lake Mead, past the Fiesta.
Okay.
And then also right by the Whole Foods, we had like 2 houses over there.
Oh, nice. Yeah, John and I live in Henderson. I've lived here for almost 20 years, which is crazy to say. I cannot believe that next year it'll be 20 years. John moved here, I think, in like 2010-ish. So he's been here going on 15 years pretty soon. And yeah, I've lived in Henderson the whole time. John lived in Summerlin when we first met. And I have three baby sisters, well, they're not babies, my three younger sisters and both my parents all live here now. They all eventually moved here once I did. So, yeah, they live all over town. And it's, I think it has its pros and cons like every place you live. You
Yeah.
know, it has, I think it's awesome to live in a place where you can see, you know, a headlining, you know, concert or comedian or some crazy Cirque show or something at the Sphere whenever you want. And you can also, like me, live out in the suburbs, like you said, near a Whole Foods, and kind of have a little bit of distance from that too. So it's like the benefits of the big city, but also regular, slower suburban life too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like there's definitely two sides to it, the entertainment aspect and then the family aspect. Because there's also like a huge Mormon community out
Mm-hmm.
there. There's a huge Christian community. There's a huge, like, mega
Mm-hmm.
churches out there, you know.
Yeah.
So it's really built up in family orientation as well.
Absolutely. My house is actually close to a synagogue, and on my street we have huge Jewish family population too. So yeah, it's a really, really diverse city. I don't think that gets talked about enough. You're right. I think also I read recently, um, I think outside of like California, like LA and San Francisco, Vegas has the highest percentage of LGBTQ people, which kind of fits, right? It's like an entertainment, like an offshoot of like Hollywood and performers, which I think often have like really strong queer communities too. So I'm like, gosh, I didn't even realize how diverse our city is, that it's like at the top of the charts for some of these markers that people look at. Yeah. It's and it's growing all the time. I mean, you know that, like new houses, new
Yeah.
developments all the time. They don't care if the mountains are there. They just build it on the mountains now. It's getting bigger all the time, and that's kind of why I moved here, because the infrastructure of the city, you know, the things like domestic violence shelters, food banks, the school system could not grow along with the population. So there was a lot of need for people who wanted to work in like the social services work that I do, because it was just, there's so many people who needed help and there just was not services yet. So we're still working on that. But yeah, it's I don't know. I love living here. There's always something going on.
Yeah. Okay. No, talk about your background of social work, especially in regards to the podcast. And
Oh
then we'll
yeah.
get into the story that of Tabitha Tozi.
Sure. I went to, well, I grew up in New Jersey. I went to school in Arizona at the University of Arizona. I studied criminal justice. And when I was going to graduate, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but told one of my professors I want to help people. And he was like, there's this law school in New York City I think you'd be great for. Check it out. And I was like, I don't know about law school, but he was right. I went to law school. It was an incredible experience. And in my last year, I worked in what was called then the Battered Women's Rights Clinic. So, my third year of law school, most of the studying I did was actually practicing law, helping women who were in situations, abusive situations, that wanted to get divorced or get an order of protection. So, that was what my third year of law school looked like. Helping, I only really had two clients at the time. One woman who was having a terrible time trying to get her divorce finalized, and I was able to help her do that. And another woman who, she was married to a man who was a citizen, but she was not a citizen, and he was kind of withholding her right to become a citizen as part of his control, and she just could not take it anymore. It was becoming dangerous for her and her son, so we were able to help her petition to the government to get her immigration status sorted without him. He didn't have to do anything. She could just be like, I live here, I'm married to an American citizen, I want to be on the path to citizenship. So we were able to help her do that. And after I finished law school, graduated, passed the bar, I went to work for the family court in Brooklyn. And it was such a stressful thing. You see all these families coming in asking for help, and there's only ever going to be so much that a court can do to put a family whole together. And I was just like, I think I want to be on the other side of this. I don't want to be on the after crime. I want to be on the before crime. So I want to be on prevention. And that's kind of when I decided that I wanted to move to Vegas, because there was a huge need here. I wanted to go back to the Southwest like it was when I went to college. and I wanted to work in prevention. So I went to work in child abuse prevention. I did some work in mental health, substance abuse treatment, and then finally into domestic violence full time, working for shelters and helping them raise money so they can continue their program. So that's mostly what I've been doing. I have yeah, I've been doing this work, gosh, in Vegas for almost 20 years now. I can hardly believe it. But yeah, it's been amazing. I've had a lot of opportunity to work with amazing folks here in town who are doing incredible work to help families, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I guess basically what happened was CrimeCon came to Vegas, and it was the year that Gabby Petito was murdered. And I reached out to the folks at CrimeCon, and I was kind of like, please, when you have your sessions on Gabby's story, please make sure you have resources available to people, because in my experience, it's so common that when it comes up, people have a lot of emotions, and I wanted them to be able to know that here's the hotline, you can reach out. I pressed them on that, and I actually went to CrimeCon like armed with like brochures and cards from the agency I worked for, so I could like hand them out to people or like put them out somewhere for people, because I just wanted I wanted anyone who heard her story and felt any kind of way to have a pathway to get to find someone that could help them if that's what they wanted to do. And after doing the CrimeCon thing, I think that's when I found out about TCPT, and that kind of led me to you all. And when I was with my husband at TCPT in Austin, or TCPF in Austin, he was just kind of like, are you hearing what I'm hearing? And so many of these true crime stories, you hear it, there's that undercurrent of interpersonal violence. It's like a hard reality that I think a lot of people don't really want to talk about. And then we have so many colleagues now that have stories that kind of have that undercurrent. And I know from living in Vegas and Nevada that we, for the past 25 years, have been in the top 10 of the highest percentage of women murdered by men. It's not always their partner, but it's women murdered by men. And I'm kind of like, this could be an opportunity, like you said, to find your niche in true crime, to kind of say, these are the things I want to talk about. I want to talk about how can we prevent this. And I want to talk about the realities of what life is like in Vegas, because I live here and people have this perception of it. And I think I want them to learn more about it, because I love living here, and I don't want people to think of it, to broaden their thoughts about it. I guess I'll say it that way, to remember that there's people behind these stories. The women who bring you your bottle, they're real women with real lives. So that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's the big story, to take you all the way. It's like my whole life story.
Wow, I didn't know that you had that much background too.
Oh, I couldn't remember how much we'd ever really talked about that. Yeah, it was a lot of it happened a long time ago, and living in New York is totally different than living here. And sometimes I miss it, and there are definitely times where I'm like, oh man, I wish I was back in a courtroom so I could argue for this person or support this person. And then other times I'm like, I'm glad I'm where I am. And sometimes I'm like, gosh, doing this podcast work is so hard, and but I love it, and I want to keep telling these stories, especially when families come to us and they say, hey, we know you normally don't cover a story like this, but this happened, and it would be awesome if you would talk about it. John and I did a story a couple weeks ago. This is really weird. I'm not sure if any podcast has ever done this before, but a dog was killed in our community, and we decided to cover that in an episode because so many members of our community were out there saying, like, who killed this dog and why would somebody hurt this dog, and we want the person responsible for that to be caught and dealt with accordingly. So we actually did a whole episode on a dog. And so it's, like I said, we want to talk about domestic violence, but we also want to talk about what's going on in our own community.
I love that. And I don't like what happened to the dog. It was a bulldog, right?
Yep. Yeah, she was found abandoned in like people call it like a tote, like a plastic storage bin that maybe you put stuff in your garage and that has like a lid that clips shut. You all know what I'm talking about when I say that. And she was found like behind a grocery store next to the dumpster. She was still alive when she was found. It was in July, so it was, I think, 110, 106, 110. She was almost passed away from severe heat stroke. They were able to get her to emergency services. She survived overnight, but then ultimately had a stroke from blood clots that had developed from her being so overheated and so dehydrated. Her name was Reba. That was the name the folks who rescued her gave her. And yeah, the community was just so disgusted that someone would do this to an animal, tape her up and lock her in a bin. So just wanted to get the story out there in case someone had something, someone could identify her, where she came from. And I'm sad to say that even 2 months later, no one has come forward with a tip that's led to her being found, or the people responsible being found. And I think it's really hard. Just like a little, like you said, a beautiful bulldog girl. Sucks.
Oh, that makes me teary-eyed, and I'm just
I
like, breaks my
know.
heart.
Us
But
too. It sucks.
yeah, I need a moment.
Take it.
I feel like dog stories are the worst too. Like, they get to you the worst.
They really do. And yeah, we like I said, we heard the story. I was like, I feel like this is a little weird, but let's cover it anyway, because we're both animal lovers. And like I said, it's my community. I want the person responsible to be, like I said, dealt with accordingly.
Yeah.
So.
No. We're both, animal lovers.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get to meet Dixon, but your husband did.
Oh, I know. I'm so jealous. I bet you Dixon was like in love with him, because it seems like every dog John meets, the dog like goes nuts for him every time. It's like the dogs know that he's just the ultimate dog guy, and they just go crazy for him.
Well, I have my trauma, and like
Oh.
my trauma's with men, and so he's men particular. It like takes him a
Okay.
minute to like build that relationship up with men. So it was funny because he was barking at John,
Mm-hmm.
and then John just is like petting him,
Mm-hmm.
and he's still barking at him, and I'm just like, well, he's not biting you, so
Yeah.
okay.
Was John saying, "Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Oh, I know." I'm sure he always talks I love it. It's like one of my favorite things about him. We've like fostered some dogs. We volunteered at the animal shelter for a while because that's where his heart is, with the dogs, for sure. Not that mine's not, but John is like a different level when it comes to animals, different level.
It's just funny because I'm like, well,
Dixon has boundaries.
so I guess it's all okay. And like,
Oh
because,
my gosh.
like a dog barking, it's like usually a warning, like, I'm going to bite you. But my dog was just like, no, I'm just barking.
That's so funny.
I'm
so sad I couldn't be there. Oh my gosh. I would have loved to have met him.
There will be another one in
Of course.
October. I'm
Awesome.
actually, after this, talking to a company. It might get filmed.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So yes, I'll give you more information afterwards about that. But I'm, in the routine of like planning true crime meetups now, and just
I love it.
excited about it. But, back to you.
Okay.
Back to your podcast. One of the stories mentioned about Tabitha Tozi. Can you tell me about her story?
Yeah, absolutely. Tabitha was a young woman who lived here in Las Vegas. When she was around 26 years old, she was sadly murdered by her boyfriend. This just happened in April of 2023. Tabitha was, so many things, but she was an aspiring model, huge Instagram following. 37,000 people followed her on Instagram, and she had 3,800 Facebook friends. Like, she was just, when I was talking before about Las Vegas and what Las Vegas is like, she was putting herself out there like a real hostess, like a real come to Vegas, come meet me, come party with me kind of vibe. But at the same time, Tara had a whole separate Instagram account that was her own poetry. So she was like writing poetry, and she was a dog lover, a dog mom. Her nationality was Brazilian, so she was like a huge soccer fan. Just awesome person. I mean, I wish I knew her, but I heard from so many friends and family. I feel like I can kind of talk about her like that. Like I did know her. I really wish I did. She was the sole, it was her and her mom. And she was the one that was working in the family and also sending money back to help her grandma who was suffering from dementia that still lived in Brazil. So just like huge hearted person, amazing person. And her boyfriend at the time, his name is Oswaldo Nathaniel Perez Sanchez, but everybody called him Nate. And Nate, according to her mom and her friends and family, he started showing some red flags. They only dated about 8 months, but he was doing that jealousy controlling thing. Like she would get on the phone and he'd make her get on speaker so he could hear who she was talking to, being concerned about her going out and who she was spending time with, that kind of controlling behavior. And one of the, I don't even know, red flag doesn't seem like a big enough thing to say to describe it, but he got a tattoo of her face on his arm before they even started dating. He got a tattoo of her. And I think looking back, some of her friends were like, yeah, that he was like obsessed with her. He said he was in love with her, but it wasn't that. It was more like this obsession. And that obsession really turned to like controlling behavior. And it was a Friday night. It was April 21st, 2023. She went out with friends, stayed out really late, came home in the morning, and he was there and he was unhappy with her staying out all night, started an argument with her. She tried to call her mom and ask her mom to come get her to help her because he took her car keys and wouldn't let her leave. And he ended up having a gun and he shot her. And then her friend that her friend, another woman that she had been partying with was there at the house with her. And he went up to that woman's car and pointed the gun at her friend and basically carjacked the friend and drove off in the friend's car. And that's when the friend was able to call 911 and get someone there. Tabitha didn't pass away right away. She was put on life support. And about 2 days later, she ended up donating her organs and she was taken off life support. And I think what I talked about in the podcast we did about Tabitha was you can just get a sense as to how generous she was all the time, that even in her death, she was generous in donating her whole self to other people. And it goes without saying that this was completely devastating for her friend, for her mom. And I think one of the most frustrating things for her mom was that it took 10 days for the police to declare Nate to be the suspect, to put out a warrant for his arrest, even though at the time, her friend called 911, they knew exactly what car he was driving. The friend was basically a witness to what happened. It wasn't this big mystery as to who may have done this. It seemed like it was very hot pursuit. Like they knew it was him. He took off in the friend's car, but it took 10 days. I mean, now he's on the FBI's most wanted list. They still haven't found him. And her mom, Regina, she continues to talk about it, that she wants everyone to know his face and to be out there looking for him. So on our Sins and Survivors social media, every Wednesday we post this picture in just hopes people will share it and get the word out there, because that's what they have been begging him to turn himself in. They have been saying, when I say they, her mother, the whole Tabitha support, they call themselves Tabby's tribe. So the whole Tabby tribe, they want him to turn himself in. They think he abused their trust as much as he abused Tabitha's trust by convincing them that he was somebody who could be trusted with her. So I think just as far as it's just such a horrible and tragic story, and we wanted to share it on the podcast, like I said, because her parents, her friends, our whole community, we all deserve justice for what happened to Tabitha. I can't say enough what a beautiful, well-rounded, amazing, smart, incredible, loving, caring person she was. It is ugly and horrible what happened to her, and we just want him to be brought to justice and face up for what he did.
Yeah. In regards to like when he came in and shot her, was he, like, where were the wounds? Was he trying to like hurt her, or was he like going in with the intent to
The
unalive her.
It sounds like unalive because he did shoot her in the head. And I think the part that the friend who was there for the whole thing, I think she was like getting into her own car is how I understand it from the friend. She was getting into her own car and he like shot her in the front seat of the car. But when the friend, after he carjacked her and she ran to the car to help Tabitha, she couldn't even find it first where she had been shot. Like she saw the blood but she couldn't find the wound, I think, because it was like behind her head or like in her hair or something like that.
Or maybe there wasn't an exit wound.
Yeah, I think it might have
Okay.
been something like that. Yeah. And I don't think anyone could really make an argument it was and truly accidentally or what he was doing, if he just didn't want her to leave. And as I was saying before, it sounded like his love of her was really more of this controlling obsessive jealousy thing. And it's horrible what happened. And I am frustrated, like as Regina has said, that the fact that it took a while, because if they had put out a be on the lookout right away when it happened, perhaps he could have been apprehended sooner. They think that maybe he crossed the border or he went to California. Like, who knows? He could have gone anywhere at this point. That was Regina's point too. It's been 10 days. How far can you get in 10 days? You can get pretty far. So I say that to say, like I said, his wanted poster's out there. Like I said, we share it every Wednesday. And yeah, anyone with information, please call Las Vegas Metro Homicide Division. Or as we always say, you can call Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous, which is 385-5555, 702-385-5555. And just leave a tip if you know where he is, because we would love to be able to announce on the podcast that he has been apprehended. And we really would love that for her friends and family who've been waiting. Now it's been 18 months since she died, give or take.
Okay. And you collaborated with the family, and you said you talked to the family and stuff.
I talked to a few of her friends. I do speak with her mom, but not so much about the case. I just kind of check in with her mom and just say, like, how are you doing? When Tabitha's birthday passed in April, her birthday's in June. When her birthday passed in June, I have like checked in on her. I've offered to her that we have a lot of connections, right, with other podcasts, and said, hey, if you want to talk about what happened, you want to get your daughter's story out there, like I can help connect you with some people. I think that she might be doing something with Paige and Natalie on Murder Diaries. I hope very soon. I hope that that's going to happen. So we'll see. Yeah. I think they're holding up okay. They did do a large protest and march last October of 2023 to kind of draw more attention and get the media's eyes back on what was going on. I will check in with her soon and see if she's planning on something else now that it's been even a year since that. See where she's at and where the family and friends are at with just trying to keep her name out there, keep her story out there so someone will come forward. We did have another woman who was murdered in 2020 in Vegas. The alleged man who is alleged to be responsible for her death was apprehended and is in the process of being extradited from Mexico. So anything can happen. I don't think too much time has passed. I think somebody out there, like we always say, somebody knows something, and if the right person comes forward, yeah.
I love that. I love that that's one of the ways that podcasts can help bring awareness and help survivors and help these like co-victims in these situations, And I love everything that you do with your background, because
Thank
you
you.
also have the education to help provide that actual support. And another thing is that I love is that you know how to just reach out and also not make it about the story, but just know that that person needs someone to check in.
Yeah. I think that's part of it that you said sometimes gets forgotten, that once a podcaster does the story, the family, like our time with that story maybe has ended. but it doesn't end for the family. So try and just check in on them, and just kind of say, hey, how was today? Kind of thing. And just I try. It's hard because there's a lot of pain and a lot of grief that a lot of people are experiencing, and it's tough. But yeah, thank you for saying that. Like we do try and keep in touch with the families that we have worked with and talked to. We try.
I love that. And now, before we get into the Patreon segment,
Ooh,
is
okay.
there any last things you want to tell the audience before we get into that segment?
I just want to remind everyone that October will be Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And it will also be, I can't believe we've been doing the podcast for a year, but it'll be the start of our second season. And with that second season, John and I have talked to some of our other friends in the podcasting community, and we're going to be doing different feed drops. We have a collaboration in the works with a podcast that's called Alleged Actually, that is a mother-daughter all video podcast. This is different for us because ours is audio. But they do it's totally different than true crime. It's more like Bravo shows and talking about those kind of reality shows. But they approached us to do an episode about there's a couple they're ghost hunters. They used to be on Zach Bagans' show, and I guess that they had sadly there was a murder suicide with the two of them, and they approached us to say, can we tell this story? Will you be a part of that? Will you bring in that true crime side? We'll bring the reality TV side, and you bring the true crime side. And we're so excited about that. That's something that John and I have not done before, so we're excited for that. But yeah, I think we will have 5 original episodes and then 4 different episodes from different partners in the true crime community, because John and I wanted to share stories of survivors not from Las Vegas that have important stories to get out there. So that's the plan for October. And I don't know, I'll just say it. I don't know if Jake wants me to, but John and I are trying to work with Jake from Strictly Stalking and Love Less Fear to do a collaboration, which I'm hoping can come out in October, but it might be the first week of November. But we just kind of started working on that. So I'm just grateful for all the people in our community who are always thinking about, how do we get these stories out there? How do we get more attention on the cases that need it? How do we raise awareness? So yeah, I think that I would love if everyone would follow us at Sins and Survivors. We're on Instagram, and that's mostly where you'll find us, or TikTok and Facebook and on YouTube. And our podcast is on all platforms. So you can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, anywhere you listen to podcasts, we're there. And yeah, it's just called Sins and Survivors.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
No,
And
thank you.
check out the podcasting course starting again
Yes.
October 1st. And for the people dropping off here, goodbye. And for the people continuing on to the Patreon, let's continue over. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Tara's Baddies Club with Shaun. I hope you appreciated this episode, and check out the podcasting course on my website, terranewellsurvival.com. There will also be a link to it in the show notes, so check it out in the show notes. And also, I love to hear your feedback. Please write a review, be kind, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening.